When you close your eyes, right, and try to picture the epicenter of a global solar power revolution, your mind probably jumps straight to a desert.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
you imagine endless rows of these gleaming panels soaking up the blazing sun in, I don't know, the Sahara,
Yeah.
or maybe the American Southwest.
Yeah, that is the standard mental image for sure.
Right. You almost certainly do not picture the snowy, freezing, remarkably dark winters of the Nordics and Baltics.
Yeah, definitely not.
But, and this is wild, solar is actually stepping up to become a massive, a pivotal player in one of the most ambitious green energy transitions on planet Earth.
It really is. And I mean, it sounds completely counterintuitive at first glance, right?
Absolutely.
But that geographical challenge is exactly what makes this region such a, well, a perfect proving ground.
How so?
Because if you can engineer a stable, 100% renewable energy grid in a place where the sun practically disappears for months at a time,
Right.
then you have basically created a blueprint that can be applied anywhere in the world.
And that blueprint is exactly our mission for today's deep dive. We are unpacking how these cold climate countries actually plan to pull off a fully renewable energy system by 2050.
Right.
And more importantly, what you, the listener, can learn from their strategy for totally avoiding fossil fuels.
Exactly.
So the insights we are walking through today come from a highly detailed piece of research. The full title, The Impact of Solar Photovoltaics on the Energy Industry Transition in the Nordic and Baltic Countries.
And, you know, we are not just going to list off a bunch of green technologies today.
Well, yeah.
What we are really going to explore are the mechanics behind the transition pathways up to 2050. We want to look at how and why this actually works.
Right, because you can't just, throw millions of solar panels at a power grid and hope for the best.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It requires a meticulously engineered, perfectly balanced system to keep the lights on and the heat pumping when a January blizzard rolls in.
Definitely. And just a quick note, to keep our conversation flowing for you listening, we're going to refer to that source material simply as this study from here on out.
Sounds good.
So to understand a transition of this scale, we really have to look at the raw physics of where the power is coming from.
Right, the generation side.
Exactly. Because this study notes something staggering. Electrifying society, and we mean transport, heavy industry, heating, literally everything, requires a 4- to 6-fold expansion of electricity generation capacity.
Yeah, the scale is just massive.
We are talking about building a grid that handles up to 6 times more power than it does today. So where is all that juice actually originating?
Well, in the high ambition pathways modeled in this study, which those are the scenarios that actually hit net zero emissions between 2035 and 2040 wind power, and solar photovoltaics will jointly supply somewhere between 79% and 86% of the entire region's electricity by 2050.
Wow. That is a massive majority.
It really is.
But let's break down the split between the two, because the numbers in this study highlight a really unique dynamic. Wind is doing the heaviest lifting, correct?
Wind is absolutely the workhorse of the Nordic-Baltic system.
Okay.
It is projected to generate between 58% and 70% of the actual electricity supply.
Which makes sense, right?
Yeah, it makes perfect geographical sense given the incredible sustained wind resources in places like the North Sea and the Baltic Sea.
Right, those offshore winds are brutal.
Exactly. But the role of solar is where the math gets genuinely fascinating.
Okay, lay it on me.
So solar photovoltaics will make up 44% to 54% of the total installed capacity in the physical system. But it will only generate about 17% to 22% of the actual electricity supply.
Wait, let me stop you there to make sure we are visualizing this correctly.
Sure.
We are building an astronomical amount of solar panels. They make up roughly half of the physical infrastructure of the new grid.
Right.
But they are only delivering about a fifth of the actual power.
That is correct. It comes down to the meteorological reality of the region, specifically a metric called full load hours.
Full load hours.
Yeah. Solar panels in Northern Europe simply experience fewer hours of direct, intense sunlight compared to wind turbines, which can, spin day and night regardless of the season.
Then why build them?
What do you mean?
I mean, if I'm a grid planner, why dedicate half my physical infrastructure to a technology that underperforms compared to wind? That seems like a really bad allocation of resources.
Well, it would be if we were only looking at total annual output.
Okay.
But the grid doesn't operate on an annual average, right? It operates second by second.
Oh, true.
The reason you build that massive solar capacity is fundamentally about complementarity.
Complementarity.
Yeah. The weather patterns that drive wind and solar in this specific region balance each other out almost perfectly.
Okay, how so?
Well, seasonally, winds in the Nordics are strongest in the deep winter, driven by powerful low-pressure systems.
Right.
And that happens to be exactly when energy demand peaks for heating. But solar generation obviously drops near zero.
Because it's dark all the time.
Exactly. Then, in the summer, high-pressure systems move in. The wind dies down significantly, but the long northern summer days mean solar generation spikes massively.
So they basically fill in each other's gaps.
Precisely.
I always try to visualize the energy grid like a tag team wrestling match.
Yeah, I like that.
Wind is your heavyweight, right? Taking the hits and doing the heavy lifting through the brutal winter.
Yep.
And then solar is the high flyer, tagging in to dominate during those long summer days when the heavyweight needs a breather.
That is a surprisingly accurate analogy, and they also balance each other out on a daily basis, too.
Oh, right, because of day and night?
Exactly. Even within a 24-hour period, wind tends to blow stronger at night, while solar obviously peaks at midday.
Okay, that makes sense. But of course, meteorology isn't perfect, right?
Yeah, definitely not.
There are still times when the wind simply isn't blowing and the sky is completely overcast.
Yeah, that happens.
The dreaded windless, cloudy winter week. What happens then? Like, if our two tag team partners are both exhausted and knocked out on the mat, who steps in?
That is where the third partner sitting ringside comes in.
And that is?
Hydropower.
Ah, okay.
The Nordic system, particularly in Norway and Sweden, possesses massive legacy hydropower reservoirs.
Oh, right. They've had those for years.
Decades, yeah. These are essentially giant geographic batteries that have been in place forever.
Wow.
So when wind and solar generation fall short of demand, the grid managers can literally just open the gates on the hydro dams.
So hydropower acts as the steady, reliable backbone of the entire transition.
Exactly. Because you can control the flow of water instantly, it balances those generation deficits completely on demand.
That is amazing. Having that legacy hydro system is a massive geographic lottery win for them.
It really, really is.
But let's look at the opposite problem.
Okay.
What happens when both of our tag team partners are in the ring at the same time, going absolutely crazy?
Oh, the overgeneration issue.
Yeah. Picture a crisp spring day, right? The wind is howling off the Baltic Sea at maximum velocity and the sun is blazing down on millions of solar panels. How does the grid not just melt down from too much power?
That is arguably the defining engineering challenge of a highly renewable system.
I bet.
Electricity grids are incredibly sensitive machines. They must be perfectly balanced at all times.
Right.
The supply of electricity must equal the demand second by second. If you push too much power into the wires, the frequency fluctuates, transformers blow, and you get cascading blackouts.
That sounds disastrous. So what's the fix?
To manage these massive simultaneous spikes in generation, grid operators in this study rely on two primary mechanisms.
Okay, what are they?
They use curtailment and immense system flexibility.
Curtailment. I want to dig into this one because I've heard this term thrown around, and it always strikes me as bizarre.
It confuses a lot of people.
You are telling me we intentionally turn off solar panels and break wind turbines when they are producing the most power?
Yes, exactly. Grid operators will intentionally dial back power generation to protect the grid.
But wait, doesn't that destroy the return on investment?
How do you mean?
I mean, we are spending billions of euros to build these massive solar farms, and when the sun is finally shining at its absolute brightest, we just pull the plug.
I know, it sounds counterintuitive.
That sounds wildly inefficient to me. Like, why wouldn't we just build enough batteries to capture every single drop of that free sunshine?
It feels incredibly wrong to turn off clean energy, but this is where you have to separate the physics from the economics.
Okay, explain that to me.
You have to ask, what is the actual financial cost of capturing that absolute last drop of peak power?
I assume it's high.
It's astronomical. Curtailment isn't a failure of the system. It is an intentional, operational reality.
Really?
Yeah, think of it like building a rain catchment system for your house.
Okay.
You build a barrel big enough to handle 95% of the rainstorms you get in a year.
Makes sense.
But once a decade, you get a biblical flood. Does it make financial sense to build a 1-million-gallon concrete bunker under your house just to capture the overflow from that one freak storm?
Oh. No, obviously not. You'd go bankrupt.
Right. You just let the barrel overflow into the street.
Ah, I see.
The grid works the exact same way. Building a few extra solar panels to ensure you have enough power on cloudy days, and simply dialing them back for a few hours a year when generation peaks excessively.
It's just way cheaper.
It is exponentially cheaper than trying to build a massive multi-billion-dollar battery facility just to store a tiny fraction of extreme, rare excess power.
Wow, okay.
Curtailment is a financial safety valve.
When you frame it around the exponential cost of capturing the extreme peaks, that actually makes total sense.
Right.
It's cheaper to let a little bit spill over the edges than to build a billion-dollar bucket just for the overflow.
Precisely. But that being said, the system modeled in the study does capture as much of that excess energy as humanly and economically possible before they resort to curtailment.
So they aren't just throwing it away casually.
Definitely not. And that brings us to how they actually manage all this volatile generation, utilizing what are called central flexibilities.
Okay, so if curtailment is just the emergency overflow valve, what does the rest of the plumbing look like?
Right.
How is this study saying the Nordics and Baltics will actually absorb all this fluctuating power?
Think of grid flexibility like a highly diversified financial portfolio.
Okay, I like a good metaphor.
You need different accounts for different time horizons. For the immediate daily fluctuations in wind and solar, your checking account liquidity, the system relies heavily on electric vehicles.
EVs.
Yeah, but not just as transportation. This study models the massive impact of smart charging and vehicle-to-grid, or V2G, technology.
Okay, I've heard of V2G.
It's huge. By 2050, this study projects that EV batteries plugged into the system could offer 320 gigawatt hours of storage capacity.
Wait, 320 gigawatt hours? That number's hard to wrap my head around.
It is a phenomenal amount of storage.
I mean, it's one thing to have a centralized hydro dam that a grid operator controls with a single lever, right?
Sure.
But how do you coordinate millions of individual parked cars to act as a single flexible battery for a whole region?
It relies entirely on smart software acting as a market aggregator.
How does that actually look for the driver?
Let's look at the mechanism. Your EV has a bidirectional charger, meaning it can take power in, but it can also push power back out to the grid.
Okay.
When you get home, you plug your car in. The software on your phone knows your schedule. It knows you don't need to leave for work until 7 a.m. and you only have a 20-kilometer commute.
Right.
Your car communicates with the regional grid and essentially says, I have 50 kilowatt hours of available battery space, and I am parked here for the next 12 hours.
And the grid just manages it.
Exactly. When the wind dies down at 6 p.m. and demand spikes because everyone is cooking dinner, the grid actually drains a tiny bit of power from your car to balance the system.
No way.
Yeah. Then, at 3 a.m., when the wind is howling and power is dirt cheap, the grid floods your car with electrons to charge it back up.
And I don't have to do anything.
Nothing. You, the owner, are financially compensated for providing this service, and you still wake up with exactly the range you requested.
That is incredible. It essentially turns the population's driveways into millions of tiny, decentralized power plants, trading electricity while we sleep.
That is exactly what it does.
Okay, so that handles the daily hour-by-hour fluctuations. But what about the seasonal shifts?
Ah, the longer term.
Yeah, if we were using the financial portfolio metaphor, EVs are the checking account.
Right.
What acts as the savings account for when the solar panels go dark for weeks in the winter?
For seasonal flexibility, the study relies heavily on power to heat.
Power to heat.
Yes. We have to remember that a massive portion of energy demand in this cold region isn't for electricity to run laptops and televisions.
Right.
It's for thermal energy to keep people from freezing in January.
Ah, yes. And they already have massive district heating networks, don't they?
Yeah.
Where whole cities are heated by central boilers piping hot water into homes.
Exactly. That infrastructure is already there. So how do you integrate that with wind and solar?
Have you?
When the wind is blowing hard in the autumn and electricity is abundant, they use that excess electricity to run massive industrial-scale heat pumps.
Okay, so not like the one behind my house.
No. These aren't like the ones in our residential backyard. These are industrial behemoths. They convert the cheap electricity into heat, and then they physically store that heat.
Where do you store heat?
They can store it in the massive water tanks of the district heating networks, or increasingly in high-temperature thermal energy storage systems.
Wait, let's break down the mechanics of thermal energy storage, because storing electricity in a lithium-ion battery makes sense to people. But how do you just, store heat for weeks at a time?
You rely on the physics of thermal mass.
Thermal mass.
You use the excess electricity to superheat a massive volume of a specific material, often huge insulated tanks of water. or even silos filled with crushed rock or sand.
Sand.
Really? Yeah. You heat them to hundreds of degrees. And because these silos are heavily insulated, the thermal mass retains that heat for weeks or even months with very little loss.
That is wild.
Then, in the dead of winter, when the wind stops and it's freezing outside, you extract that heat and pump it directly into the city's heating grid.
Wow.
You are effectively using rock or water as a giant, cheap, low-tech battery.
That is a brilliant mechanism. You're just banking today's wind storm as hot water for next month's blizzard.
Exactly.
But I see a limitation here.
What's that?
EVs and thermal mass are fantastic for residential needs, right? But you can't run a commercial transport grid on a hot shower.
No, you cannot.
And you certainly can't run a massive steel foundry or cargo ship on a Nissan Leaf battery.
True.
Heavy industry requires intense, sustained, high-density energy. So what is the long-term bond in our financial portfolio metaphor?
That limitation is exactly why the third central flexibility is so critical. Electrolyzers and underground hydrogen storage.
Okay, hydrogen.
Right. When there's a massive surplus of solar and wind that exceeds what the EVs and thermal storage can absorb, this study shows them using that power to run electrolyzers.
Just to remind me, what exactly does the electrolyzer do?
An electrolyzer is a facility that runs an electrical current through water to separate the hydrogen and oxygen molecules.
Okay.
And that creates green e-hydrogen.
Right. And hydrogen is a chemical fuel, so it's incredibly energy dense.
Very dense.
But the scale required to run heavy industry must be enormous. How much of this are they planning to do?
The scale is staggering. This study predicts electrolyzer capacity in the region will grow to between 32 and 62 gigawatts by 2050.
62 gigawatts.
Yep. To put that in perspective, a typical nuclear reactor produces about 1 gigawatt.
Whoa.
We are talking about the equivalent of dozens of nuclear plants worth of capacity dedicated entirely to manufacturing green fuels.
That is insane. Where do you even put all that hydrogen once you make it? You can't just leave it sitting in a tank on the surface. Right?
No, the volumes are way too vast. The mechanism for storing it is geological.
Geological.
They pump the hydrogen gas deep underground into naturally occurring salt caverns or depleted gas fields.
Literally underground.
Literally underground, yeah. Because it's stored under immense natural pressure, it can sit there safely for months.
That is so cool.
It holds that concentrated energy until a steel mill needs it to forge metal or until a shipping company needs to synthesize it into green methanol for a cargo ship. It completely solves the density and storage problem that batteries just can't handle.
Okay, so we have EVs handling the daily shifts, thermal mass storing the heat, and underground hydrogen caverns powering heavy industry.
Right.
But let me push this system to the absolute brink.
Bring it on.
What if a massive, stagnant, dark weather system parks itself over the entire Nordic region for 2 weeks? No wind, no sun. The batteries are draining, the hot water is cooling. What is the ultimate failsafe?
The ultimate failsafe is that you aren't an island. The final flexibility mechanism is power grid exchange. The power grid in this study isn't isolated. It's connected via massive undersea and overland cables to neighboring regions.
Of course.
If the entire Nordic system is experiencing a freak deficit, they import power from continental Europe.
And vice versa, I imagine.
Exactly. If the Nordics are producing a massive surplus, they export it. The broader the geographic area you connect, the smoother the weather variations become. It might be still and dark in Stockholm, but the wind is usually blowing somewhere in Europe.
Okay, seeing all these mechanisms laid out, the smart EVs acting as a hive mind, the gigawatts of electrolyzers, the underground salt caverns, the international grid upgrades, it is an incredible feat of engineering.
It really is a marvel.
But this is where we have to address the elephant in the room.
The cost.
Yeah. We've been talking about building 62 gigawatts of hydrogen capacity, upgrading millions of homes with smart chargers, and quadrupling the overall grid size. That cannot be cheap.
No, it is not cheap.
Who pays for this, and how does the math actually work out?
It is intensely capital heavy. This study projects a massive upfront investment peak, what the industry calls CapEx, or capital expenditure, between the years 2025 and 2035.
Okay.
To build out this core infrastructure, they estimate it will cost roughly 130 to 220 billion euros.
130 to 220 billion euros in a single decade.
Yep.
That is astronomical. How do governments or private markets convince populations to swallow that kind of a bill right now just for the promise of a cleaner grid in 2050? The sticker shock alone seems like it would paralyze the whole transition.
The sticker shock is very real, I'll give you that.
Oh.
But it requires a fundamental shift in how we view energy costs.
Okay, help me shift my view.
You have to look at the mechanism of what you are actually replacing. Right now, our fossil fuel energy system is highly dependent on OPEX operational expenditure.
Right.
We have to constantly dig up, buy, transport, and burn coal, gas, and oil every single day, forever, just to keep the lights on.
Right, because you build a natural gas plant, and the plant itself is relatively cheap to construct, but then you are a slave to the global market price of gas for the next 30 years.
Exactly. And those fuel prices are incredibly volatile. They're subject to geopolitical crises and supply chain shocks.
Although true.
What this study reveals is that once this new green infrastructure is built and that initial capex is spent, the long-term energy costs fundamentally decline.
Because there's no fuel.
Exactly. A wind turbine or a solar panel has zero fuel cost. The wind is free.
Wow.
Because of that, the study shows the levelized cost of electricity, the LCOE, which is the raw cost to generate the power, actually drops.
How much?
It falls from roughly 62 euros per megawatt hour in 2020 down to between 35 and 40 euros by 2050.
Okay, so the raw electricity gets significantly cheaper to produce.
Yes.
But what about all the conversion? Running the electrolyzers, pumping the hydrogen underground, storing the heat. Doesn't all that extra processing add a massive markup to the final bill?
That is the most crucial metric in this entire study. And it brings us to a term called LCOE fee.
Oh, see
The
that?
levelized cost of final energy.
Okay.
LCOE just measures the raw electricity at the source. LCOE includes everything.
Everything.
The cost of the wind turbine, the cost of the electrolyzer, the cost of storing the hydrogen in a salt cavern, and the cost of upgrading the grid to deliver it to the factory.
So it's the real cost.
It is the true final receipt for the energy actually consumed by society.
Got it. So what is the LCO fee?
Even when you factor in the cost of all those complex central flexibilities, the overall LCO fee sits at a highly competitive 46 euros per megawatt hour in the high ambition scenario.
And that's the scenario that reaches net zero by 2040.
Exactly.
Wow. So even with all the underground caverns and thermal mass silos factored in, it remains economically competitive.
It really does. And this is the profound economic realization of the transition.
Okay.
The financial mechanics shift entirely. You move from constantly renting your energy by purchasing volatile imported fossil fuels to simply paying off the mortgage on capital infrastructure.
Oh, I like that phrasing. Paying off the mortgage.
Yeah. You aren't just buying clean energy to feel good about the environment. You are buying self-sufficiency and absolute price stability.
You are buying sovereignty.
Precisely.
You pay the upfront cost to build the solar panels and the wind turbines, and once they are in the ground, you own your energy destiny.
Yes.
It really changes the way you think about that 220 billion euro price tag. It transforms from an ongoing expense into an investment in stability.
Exactly.
So as we synthesize everything we've unpacked today, the blueprint becomes incredibly clear.
It really does.
Navigating a green transition of this magnitude is about so much more than just planting a few wind turbines and solar panels in a field. It requires orchestrating a highly complex physical and economic system. It starts with the brilliant complementarity of wind dominating the brutal winters and solar harvesting the long summer days.
Right.
And it requires relying on legacy hydropower to act as the ultimate safety net to instantly balance generation deficits.
And crucially, it requires embracing curtailment as a financial safety valve while orchestrating those incredible central flexibilities.
Yes, the flexibilities.
Without mechanisms like smart EV charging, software trading power, thermal mass systems banking heat, and massive underground hydrogen caverns powering heavy industry, a highly renewable grid simply couldn't handle the mood swings of the weather.
It's all connected.
The flexibility of the system is what makes the whole endeavor mathematically and physically possible.
It really is a marvel of modern engineering and market design.
Yeah.
I want to thank you, the listener, for coming along on this deep dive with us today.
Yes, thank you.
It is a dense topic for sure, but understanding the actual mechanics of how we wire up the future is incredibly empowering.
I completely agree.
As a reminder, all of the pathways, the economic modeling, and the specific insights we discussed today came directly from the study. The impact of solar photovoltaics on the energy industry transition in the Nordic and Baltic countries.
But before we go, I actually want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Oh, okay, let's hear it.
Building on that concept of electric vehicles acting as a flexible checking account for the grid, Think about how this specific technology fundamentally changes your own relationship with energy consumption.
Okay.
What if, in the very near future, buying a car isn't just about purchasing a mode of transportation?
What else would it be?
What if your vehicle becomes an active, automated trader in the energy market?
Wow.
Picture your car's software quietly buying cheap wind power at 3 a.m. when there's a massive regional surplus.
Okay.
And then it automatically sells a fraction of that power back to the grid at an absolute premium during the morning rush hour when everyone is turning on their espresso machines.
That is wild.
Your car could essentially be paying off its own monthly lease while you sit at the kitchen table eating breakfast.
I mean, sign me up.
Right. How will that economic shift change the way you view the appliances sitting in your driveway right now?
Talk about a vehicle that pays for itself. It definitely makes you look at a parked car in a whole new light. Something to think about next time you walk out to your driveway. Thanks for diving deep with us.